You're listening to the DSW podcast with James Ledger.
Croeso, welcome to the Disability Sport Wales podcast with me, your host, James Ledger. Today, I've got a very special guest. This person is a multiple, and I mean multiple, world and Paralympic medalist. She's a patron for Disability Sport Wales, and she's also the chair of Sport Wales. This person is incredibly inspiring and a role model for many, including myself. So I'm so pleased to have on the show Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. How are you doing, Tanni?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a very, very busy lady.
Oh, no, it's great. I was at one of your previous recordings of your podcast sitting in the audience, so it was brilliant. So it was nice to kind of be asked the questions now as opposed to listening.
Absolutely. I think that was the Disabled Young Leaders event, wasn't it? I think the live show, you were there, which is amazing.
It was brilliant, and it's really important to listen to lots of different voices, but also, young people, and just giving them a chance to, expand their horizons, think about what they might do differently, and get them involved in lots of different things. So it was brilliant.
Absolutely. Now, Tanni, you wear, sometimes I think I wear a lot of hats, but you got a wardrobe full of hats that you wear, all different roles and different kind of positions you're in, which is, I don't know how you do it. It's a huge props to you for your time management. Must be exceptional.
It's mostly pretty good. I mean, a lot of stuff I do kind of interlinks with each other. So, it's I do a lot of disability rights work, apologies, on social media, I mostly just post about trains, a little bit about how disabled people are treated in society, and that kind of fits into the sport, physical activity. Disabled people need to be fit and healthy and active. And if they play sport at a high level, that's great, but, they need to be active. And so a lot of stuff just automatically connects to the other. So I'm very lucky, I had a lot of fun being an athlete, but I'm really lucky. I love my second career.
That's amazing to see. And it's some career both on the track and off it as well. Let me bring it back to that, as an athlete. Where did it start for you, and how did you get involved in sport?
Well, I grew up in Cardiff. My dad played quite a lot of sport. My mum watched quite a lot of sport. And I was born with spina bifida. I could walk a little bit when I was young, but by the age of 5, I was paralysed because my vertebra doesn't protect my spinal cord, and my spine collapsed, and then my own vertebra severed my spinal cord. And so my parents just knew or decided that I needed to be fit and healthy and active to be able to push my chair and lead an independent life. They basically told me they didn't want me living at home forever. Because apparently I was quite annoying. Who could imagine that? Moving on. It kind of went from there. So I played loads of sports. I swam, played tennis, basketball, and then started wheelchair racing. And really for me, when I started wheelchair racing, I just knew that was it. That was what I wanted to do.
And that feeling you got, when you found, I felt the same. I jumped around a few sports over the years, and when I found athletics and that feeling, like, can you describe to me what that feeling was like when you almost find your home, don't you? Can you tell me about that moment?
Yeah, it was. I looked at wheelchair racing from the outside and I thought it was a bit boring, to be honest. And then I tried it, and my first race, I remember just thinking, wow, this is amazing. And, I hadn't done any athletics, so I didn't really know anything about it. And then it was like, I want to do it again. And it just, there was something just connected to me that I thought it was a really cool sport, but also, I wasn't brilliant at it when I first started doing it. But, something that was quite important for me, when I was 12, I saw the London Marathon on TV, and I saw wheelchair athletes in proper racing chairs doing it. And then, Chris Hallam, who was from Cwmbran, he was on, and, he was loud and rude and terrible tasting leopard print bodysuits. And he became one of my best mates in sport, but he was really out there. And I'd only ever seen disabled people being quite passive, and on TV, there wasn't much disability representation, and here was Chris, challenging it all. And if somebody was patronizing to him, he would have told them exactly what to go and do themselves. And I was like, wow. And so there was a couple of things that happened at the same time that just drew me in. And I wanted to just do wheelchair racing, but my dad was like, no, you can't. You've got to do multi-sports. You can't just, you've got to wait till you're 16, 17 before you concentrate. And it's like, oh, okay, right, that's fine. And actually, that was really good. I think I'd say that to any young person. Now, there's a lot of pressure to do one sport if you're talented, but just try to keep it broader, because that's really useful. I mean, especially because you don't, I always say to youngsters, you've got to love your sport because you might not always like it, especially when times are tough and training's really hard. So, having a little bit where you still do other things. If you get to 16, 17 and decide that is not the sport for me, you've got other options, which I think are really important to have.
You mentioned Chris Hallam there, and I think back to yourself, Chris, John Harris, Anthony Hughes, all these legends of para sport. Who going through 12 onwards, who was your inspiration, and how important is it to have these role models and have these have disabled people represented on a bigger scale so people can relate, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely Chris and John that were a huge part of my life. So John, from when I was pretty young, was really helpful, really supportive, very kind to me. I remember going to race at a multi-sport event in St Athens, and John spending time with me, teaching me how to push a chair. Chris didn't speak to me for a few years. That probably wasn't cool enough. And then he became one of my best friends in sport, So, Chris probably didn't want some horrible little kid, sort of asking him a million questions. He was actually really kind, incredible person, actually. He had this sort of outward persona, but both of them were huge because, John, although he was a field eventer, I'd seen him on TV doing London Marathon. And, they were it because, between the two of them, they broke down so many barriers that, made it easier for me to come behind. There's also someone else in Welsh sport who's changed probably thousands of people's lives, and that's a woman called Anne Ellis. And administrator, she played hockey for GB. And she basically, got me to sit on the board of Sport Wales in my 20s. So I learned about being on a board and reading papers and finances and all this stuff. And, she, again, back then you wouldn't have had a young person sitting on a board. And she was like, no, you're going to do it. And nobody really argues with that. She's an amazing woman, like feisty, and cares so much about Welsh sport. And so, she was a real role model in terms of administration. Someone that I looked up to. And in my final Commonwealth Games, which was in Melbourne in 2006, I was team captain and she was the chef de mission, basically in charge of the team. She was fab. She was just, we used to call her, okay, I have to say this is from a place of love. Okay. So our nickname at the games was Frodo. And I don't know why, but where we were living in the village, there was some boxers from another country that would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and be skipping and training outside on the road, outside our block of houses. And she'd come out one morning in a dressing gown and had stomped down the road. She's not very tall, and stomped down the road and basically told these massive boxers to go back to bed and to stop waking up. And she was like, stop waking up my athlete. And we was just like, oh, just love her. I mean, she just cares, and so, yeah, we just, she was someone I really looked up to.
No, you as team captain as her chef de mission is what a team that was. Where was that? Which Commonwealth Games?
That was Melbourne. That was a lot of fun, yeah, and all sorts of really fun stories about. I was at the boxing one day, and so once I finished competing, I tried to get to as many different events as I could. And, you're there, kind of supporting and cheering and, having that when you're competing at the end of the games, it's really a bit miserable, to be honest. And I'd ended up at one of the boxing. The Welsh guy didn't have the right colour shirt. So being team captain, and I was wearing the right colour shirt, I basically stripped. I was wearing stuff underneath. I basically stripped off and handed in my shirt. I think he probably struggled to fit into it, but it's basically, this is what your team captain has to do. That's what happened to me. If one of my guys needs a shirt, he can have my shirt.
Did he win?
No, but no, yeah.
It's okay. The lucky shirt. You never would have got that back.
Yeah, yes. I'm not sure what happened to it, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I did get it back.
Commonwealth Games is a great convo because it's the only integrated event, isn't it, between the Olympic side and the Paralympic side. How did you find that as an integrated major event?
So my first Commonwealth Games, Auckland, we weren't allowed to stay in the accommodation. We weren't allowed kit. It was very much, you weren't part of it. We didn't have the same medals. And then Manchester really pushed it forward. But also for quite a long time, we had demonstration races at the Olympics. So from 1984 in LA, there was a demonstration women's 800 and men's 1500. And World Athletics over the years, I also raced at, I raced at 4 Olympics. I raced at a number of non-disabled world championships and Europeans. And there was a program where there was greater integration. So the World Championships in Daegu in Korea, there was a really decent, program of disabled athletes across various impairment groups competing. And then, politics and sport always, are fairly closely intertwined. Decision was taken that the IPC felt having a demonstration race at the Olympics would be taken away from the Paralympics, and that doing the same at mainstream world championships would take away from IPC World. So that was stopped. So I do think it's a shame because I think there could have been, I think there are big sports, like athletics women can do integrated events. I think they really could. And, you've always got to be really careful about, not just cherry picking the events and not just, picking minimal disability events and those with high level of impairments get chucked out. I mean, that's really awful. But I think Commonwealth Games sets a really high bar. I think it's really positive. I think for smaller countries where they struggle to have inclusive sport for disabled people, maybe some of the island nations, that does a lot to change disability rights at the same time as it's inclusive for sport. So, for small countries like Tuvalu, it really raises the profile of disabled athletes. Yeah. And it's great here, because when you see, Livy Breen winning a gold medal and, it's on the medal table and the whole Welsh nation's behind her, that's great. But it's probably some stuff we take a little bit for granted in the UK because we've always, for quite a long time, our inclusion's been all right. It could always be better. So, no, I think the Commonwealth Games is brilliant. We've got to do everything we can to protect and nurture that because it's really important for Welsh athletes.
We'll talk about London 2012 separately in a little bit, but how have you seen the Paralympic Games change and develop and the International Paralympic Committee over the years to what it is now?
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, the public perception of Paralympics has changed. I think there's a lot more, knowledge and understanding the Paralympic movement. I worked on 2012 and I remember in 2010, so I retired right at the start of 2007. And I think 2010, the organising committee did some research, which was name a Paralympian. And it was quite cool because my name came out top and recognition of me was like really high. And there wasn't really very many other athletes that the public could name. They could sort of name a sport or vaguely have it, but it was my full name. I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, this is like really cool." I went, "Yeah, it's really like cool for my ego, but no one is going to buy a ticket for 2012 to come and sit and watch me commentate on a race." And so we have to, radically change what we do, because we've got to get the names of a ton of Paralympians out there in the media, so people come and because you need to connect to it, and you want people to buy a ticket to come and watch someone they care about competing. So that was really good. So, by the time 2012 came around, there was a lot of names that were known. And so, yeah, there's been, the coverage really increased from 92, and each 4-year cycle there was more and more coverage. And so 2012, was landmark in terms of, because it was all over the media. But I think sometimes probably a bit young, but in 2000 in Sydney, there were programs on every night on the BBC, and every cycle there's been more and more coverage. And it's been shown in more jurisdictions around the world. It's now in the USA, and I think 180 countries or jurisdictions have signed up to cover some part of the games for Paris, which is amazing. It's a bit of an increase on Tokyo, but it's still going absolutely in the right direction. Where I'm a little bit more worried is that there's a bit more what we call inspiration porn out there than there was before. And this is a phrase that was developed to say about how disabled people are treated, about how we're all brave and marvelous. And, I get people coming to me and go, "Oh, you're so brave." Like, well, what? Because I'm out? Because I'm a politician? And inspiration point is a really tricky saying, because in sport, there are really definitely amazing inspirational moments that you go, "Wow, okay, I've seen that." That's what you see it in other fields as well. But just assuming that every disabled athlete is inspirational, I think is a bit of a challenge. So in a different context, I was with a mate who's a wheelchair user. We were together, and somebody came up to her and said, "You are so inspirational." And she said, "Well, because I'm an accountant." And it's getting people to think about their perception of disability and disabled people, the prejudices they attach to us. You wouldn't go up to a non-disabled accountant and go, "Oh, you're so inspirational." You might say you're a brilliant accountant, but you wouldn't call them inspirational. Apologies to any accountants out there. So I think there's still some more stuff that we need to do to separate amazing sporting moments and every disabled person being inspirational. Because when you start talking in those terms, it actually is very much based on, "Oh, I didn't believe you could actually do that. I didn't believe you could actually have a job. I didn't believe you could actually get on the tube." And that's where we are sort of behind the times in terms of how we treat disabled people. To me, Paralympics is first and foremost an amazing sporting event where people win and lose. And it does have a secondary message, but it's not the Paralympic Games' responsibility to change the whole of society. That's Parliament, that's government, that's MP, that's society itself needing and wanting to change.
How is it, being on the field of play, being on the track, and to then being, I guess, the other side and working on London 2012 as you did, and then, how did it feel like when you saw how much of a success it was, watching Johnny Peacock shush 80,000 people in the Olympic Stadium? Now, how was that for you, sitting on the other side?
So when I retired, I was so completely done with competing. The transition out was a really positive one for me, but also I've been planning it from the age of 21 and I retired at 36. So to still be involved, to be sitting, on the finish line commentating is really cool. And people say, "Do you miss it?" Well, "Oh no, it's my life has changed and evolved." But for that sort of Thursday with Johnny Peacock, amazing. So I was sitting on the finish line with Mike Costello from the BBC. We were commentating, and there'd been false starts, and then there was drama, and Oscar Pistorius was kind of expected to win, and Johnny Peacock earlier in the year had broken the world record, but at a much smaller event, and Johnny was going to start fast, but would Oscar catch him? It was all that kind of huge drama. a couple of false starts and touch it. And then Johnny just, and Mike Costello will say this, he's commentated on so many events. He has never seen anything like it, where Johnny just held his fingers to his lips. He's on the screens and just went, shh. And I get goosebumps. 80,000 people stopped talking. And stopped shuffling in their seats. That is the moment where Johnny, the people support him because he's British, and, athletics is a very friendly crowd generally. But he had 80,000 people in his hand. And when I look back on it, thinking, that's the moment he realised he could win. It was one of my favourite races of 2012. And not just racing, but my favourite moment, because it was everything leading up to it. It was the emotion and him winning. It was absolutely stunning, completely amazing victory. And 2012, there were lots of just amazing moments, everywhere. And I remember for the Olympics, but before the 2012 Olympics, somebody had asked me, there was a lot of debate about whether Paralympics should be first or not, and I just said, oh no, they're the warm-up guys for us, and that's sort of, and quite a few people said it, but that's been used in later campaigning. It was used in 2012, which was, one of the strap lines for the Olympics was "Take the stage," and at the end it was #stage taken, and then the adverts going into the Paralympics were "Thanks for the warm-up guys." And there's moments like that you just go, and I remember, we didn't know how many people would come and watch the Paralympics, so we knew lots of tickets had been sold, and there were sort of rover tickets for the park where you could go into multiple events, and you don't, people have still got to make the effort to get out of bed and leave the house and get on the transport to get there. I remember going in on the first morning of the competition, which is always heats, and it's not, it's not the most exciting. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and, I'm sure people are thinking, oh, do we make the effort? I remember going into the stadium and it was packed. And it's like, you go, okay, it's packed for heats. This is good. Because don't forget, no Olympics had kind of sold the tickets that had been sold for London for the Olympics, and certainly not for the Paralympics. So that was an amazing moment in time.
Tanni, you mentioned it earlier about transitioning out of sport. It was 2007. You said that you retired. I think you said you were ready to leave. But how was that? Because I always find transition out of sport, you hope it goes one way where it's through choice. I guess you never want to leave sport through, I guess, not your own choice, whether that's injury or something like that. But how was it for you? And what advice would you give to those who are maybe going through that transition period or thinking about transitioning out of sport? I know you prepared well for what you were going to do post career, but what advice would you give?
So I think it's always tempting to just do your sport and nothing else, and especially if you're good at it, it's really tempting. And so for me, I did my degree. I then was involved in lots of different things to build up my CV, because being a successful athlete doesn't, your name may be known to people, but you need to prove your skills. It's a long time in the past that just because you're a successful athlete, you'd be given a job that you didn't have to be very good at. And I'm not sure that was ever, necessarily really the case either, although that's what people, might like to assume. So, for me, it's do other things, read books, read the papers, know what's going on in the world. When you go to countries, find out about their history and their culture. And I remember, my first games was Seoul in '88. My dad made me go to the library to get books out on South Korea and understand, because there were huge American riots. There was a lot of political unrest in Korea, and, made me go and understand what was happening in the country that I was going into. So, keep learning. Because also the other thing, if you get successful, you get invited to dinners, you need to talk about other stuff. You can't just talk about what you did on the track 2 days ago, because it's a little bit boring unless you're also an athlete. You know, and so, you know, and so I think for me, I always planned for me not being the one to decide when I retired, because the reality is it's someone else who just, you get injured, you get broken, you know, or your team manager decides you're not quick enough. So, you know, that's kind of quite, you know, you've got to be mindful of that all the time. And I was in a really lucky position that I was the one that chose when to stop. And I really kind of managed, you know, who I told, when I told, how I kind of decided to do it, you know, was down to me. And that's important, because I think sometimes that's the moment it can be out of control. I'm a bit of a control freak, I have to say. So, yeah, it's just keep doing other things, because you need to build a CV. And, you know, there is no Paralympian. I kind of hoped it would be, I knew it was never going to happen in my career. I kind of hoped it would have happened by now. But there is no Paralympian, I think, that's ever made enough money not to have to work again. You know, so, you know, there is not squillions of pounds in disability sport. So, you know, you need to keep earning money and you also need something to do. You know, I remember I competed at the Sydney Olympics the same night Kathy Freeman won a gold medal. Amazing. 110,000 people. Stunning. Nothing will be the same as that ever again in my life. But also, I don't want it to be. So, you know, you're a long time retired. So, you know, that's why I think you've got to think about all these things. And, you know, my dad, you know, would at the end of every year and end of every season, my dad would say to me, right, you've spent every penny that you've made or earned this year. You know, that's a pension that you still don't have. And what you're going to do when you grow up. So I might have been 30 when he was telling me this, but that was kind of useful. Every year go, do I still want to do it? Am I still good? You know, and so, you know, sport doesn't, oh, this sounds really miserable thing to say, but sport doesn't owe you a living. You've got to kind of create it. So, you know, just make the most of the opportunities, but take control about what you do outside sport.
It's mentioned a great point there about, even for myself, no, thinking, talking, and doing athletics 24/7 is just not healthy, is it? Is having another avenue to think about something else is you know, benefits me as a performer as well, let alone anything else. But I think is having something else is crucial in my kind of development itself.
Yeah, and you can't train 20 hours a day. You know, if you're injured or stuff's not going the way you want it to, you need balance in your life. And the other thing I think is important as an athlete is that, you know, it does encompass your life, and it's very easy to only think of yourself as an athlete. Did you ever do Venn diagrams in school? Those funny little circles that used to interact and cut over each other. And so I like to think of myself as a Venn diagram where, you know, I was an athlete, I'm a parliamentarian, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm Welsh, love reading books, I'm really untidy. You know, all those things make me who I am. And I think it's really important for athletes that they see themselves as a combination, even though the athlete bit might be the most well-known thing about them and the thing that they're really serious about. It's really important to think about yourself in other contexts, because it helps you when your career moves to something else.
Definitely. It's really, really good points. I love that diagram as well. I think everyone should do that generally, just to, you know, understand yourself better. That's great. And my final question, Tanni, is, you know, what advice would you give to those who may be just starting their sporting journey, you know, whether they're young, old, not so old, you know, anyone who might be just starting their journey, you know, what advice would you give them?
Find something you love doing, because you don't always like it. It's really annoying, infuriating. It'll provide you with the biggest frustrations you'll ever experience in your life. It will help you build your resilience. It really will. But, you know, you can also get so much out of it, whatever level you take part in. You know, being physically active and healthy and playing sport is brilliant, and it's worth it. You know, but you know, find something that you love, and you know, you will have to be persistent. but it's a price that's worth paying.
Absolutely. Tanni, thank you so much. I really, really love speaking to you, and it's a privilege to have you on the show. So thank you so much for joining us today.